Lisa Schlein for VOA News, Geneva.
And thanks for listening to the Voice of America.
Good evening and welcome to South Sudan in Focus on the Voice of America. I'm your host, John Tanza, on this live broadcast from Washington. Here are some of the top stories making news across Sudan and South Sudan this Tuesday, March 26, 2024. South Sudan Constitution Review Commission says it lacks funds for engaging the views of the citizens.
I hope that the Commission will organize another conversation to only look at land and other resources because it requires a lot of attention and a lot of understanding. If we don't handle it well, this might spark conflict. And
Sudanese women who fled to Egypt tell their stories of how they escaped from Sudan.
Bodies were laying on the street, and the stench. Some of the bodies were covered by cardboard, and others were not. I put my son's head down so he doesn't see these scenes.
We'll have these stories and more coming up on South Sudan in Focus. The chairperson of the National Constitution Review Commission in South Sudan says his office is facing challenges as he waits for the government to finalize a budget. The commission conducted a one-week workshop for validation and experience sharing between its members and experts from the region. For VOA News, Juliana Shapai has more from Juba.
Riang Tier, chairperson of the commission, says lack of funds has prevented his office from delivering the benchmarks of the completion of a permanent constitution.
Currently, without this budget being made available, we cannot do the things that we are supposed to do. The little that we are now doing, we are doing it with the support from the development partners. And this is what has kept us going. And the delay of the release of the budget means eating away from the time that we are supposed to be using to produce the permanent constitution.
The National Constitution Review Commission is mandated to start public consultations across South Sudan on the proposed permanent constitution. The 58 members of the commission were appointed by President Salva Kiir in December last year. During their swearing-in ceremony, President Kiir urged them to move with speed and complete their work before December 2024 scheduled elections. Awag Bior is the deputy chair lady of the National Constitutional Review. She says the commission has no money for its proposed activities.
First of all, we are not able to properly plan the timelines to begin our work. And the most important aspect of this constitution-making process is the people, how we educate them on what the Constitution is and what it means for them, and then how we get their views on what they want to see in the Constitution. This is no small task. It's expensive. It requires us to send people to all 10 states and the 3 administrative areas, to spend weeks, if not months, speaking to the people, giving them all the opportunities they would like to articulate their views, their vision, and to fully understand what this is about. It's not cheap.
The Commission contracted 4 experts to enlighten its members on the constitutional review process. Lona Merkaje is a South Sudanese activist with the South Sudan Democratic Engagement Monitoring and Observation Program. She is contracted by the Commission to share her understanding of fiscal federalism. Lona says the Commission needs to do more to complete its task before December elections. She says South Sudanese are eager to discuss issues close to their hearts.
As I was making my presentation, I picked on 2 examples because fiscal federalism is basically the money federalism and how resources get to the people. And many people would talk about taxation and utilization of tax, but also fiscal federalism relates to how resources are managed and how those resources are distributed. And one of the resources I picked was land, and that was really, really intriguing because there were so many questions that came up, and it confirmed the fact that we usually say land is a very emotive issue in this country, but also land is very sentimental. And I hope that the Commission will organize another conversation to only look at land and other resources, because it requires a lot of attention and a lot of understanding. If we don't handle it well, this might spark conflict.
Earlier last week, the Troika countries of Norway, UK, and the United States issued a statement calling on South Sudanese to complete 10 remaining tasks, including the National Constitutional Review process as spelled out on the implementation matrix of the 2018 peace agreement. For VOA News, I am Juliana Sherpai in Juba.
From Juba, we move to Cairo. As the conflict between Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces approaches the one-year mark, the country's women continue to bear the brunt of unimaginable hardships and severe human rights violations. Reporter Angie Umar has this from Cairo.
When Sudan's pro-democracy movement led to the removal of President Omar Hassan al-Bashir in 2019, women played a leading role in the revolution for democracy and change. Women have long faced marginalization, harassment, and sexual violence in Sudan, and they made up a significant portion of the protesters. Today, they suffer the brunt of the civil war that began in mid-April last year. More than 6 million people, including some 105,000 pregnant women, have been forced to leave their homes since the war began, according to the United Nations. Out of the 1.2 million people who fled to neighboring countries, almost 90% are women and children. A report from Human Rights Watch says the RSF committed a large number of rapes and other war crimes during attacks in West Darfur's capital, El Geneina, between late April and late June 2023. During this year's International Women's History Month, the global community recognizes the hardships faced by Sudanese women who have experienced rape, forced displacement, and loss of their livelihoods due to the conflict. A Khartoum woman, we are referring to her by first name, Hana, for safety reasons, says her life was abandoned when the conflict reached her neighborhood. She tells VOA she was forced to leave her home. Bodies were laying on the street, and the stench. Some of the bodies were covered by cardboard, and others were not. I put my son's head down so he doesn't see these scenes, but he could hear his siblings screaming. Women, children, and men were running in different directions. I was just staying with my children. Even my oldest daughter was running and screaming. Some of the victims were children. The violence is reminiscent of the devastation that occurred in the region 2 decades ago, when more than 200,000 people were killed. The repeated detention of women on false espionage charges or because of their ethnicity has been a serious concern raised by volunteers and human rights organizations. The impact of the conflict on Sudan's education sector has also been devastating, especially for female students. Many girls are at risk of being forced into child marriages or becoming displaced. According to UNICEF, 49% of girls are missing out on primary education. As of 2017, well before the current conflict began, 3 million children have been left out of Sudan's education system. Half of them are girls. Sudan's legal system follows a strict form of Sharia law, which limits the rights of women. Sharia has seeped into Sudanese culture, thus affecting the quality and quantity of girls' education. Huda Shafiq, a feminist peace activist, says the Islamist rule in Sudan has deprived women and girls of their basic human rights.
A big part of the program, we're heavily targeting women in a way that they have founded and changed a lot of laws, for example, that aimed mainly to control women, to really control their working, their access to work opportunities, their access to education opportunities, their existence in the public spaces, in the outside areas, in their engagement in the public life, but also socially and in the workplaces as well.
Women face many challenges, including the loss of their homes, belongings, and personal security. Many have been separated from their families and have been unable to reunite due to the chaos of war. Ihsan Faghiri is a human rights activist and chair of the initiative No to Oppression Against Women in Sudan. She urges awareness be spread across the country about women's rights.
If we spread awareness among women, we need to change all the laws made by Muslim Brothers or al-Bashir regime. The law of the public order law, criminal law, and even the family law. We need completely to eradicate those and to have another laws which are very consistent with the laws of the international agreements.
The war has severely restricted the freedom of women living with conservative extended families. Strict patriarchal structures and cultural norms limit their movement and how they dress, forcing displaced women to conform and give up their independence. Despite their immense challenges, Sudanese women have shown remarkable resilience. They continue to fight for their rights, advocate for peace, and support their communities. Women continue to protect their children and strive to rebuild their lives. For VOA News, I'm Inja Omar.
A senior U.S. official says the United States is extending more than $47 million in humanitarian assistance for the emergency response in Sudan and neighboring countries like Chad and South Sudan. For VOA News, Ruben Chama reports from Nairobi.
Speaking during an online news briefing late Tuesday, the U.S. Assistant Secretary for Population, Refugees and Migration, Julieta Force Noyes, said she recently traveled to Ethiopia and Chad and met with senior government and humanitarian officials, including Chadian Prime Minister Success Masra.
To that end, I was proud to announce in my meeting with Chad's Prime Minister Masra more than $47 million in humanitarian assistance for the emergency response in Sudan and neighboring countries, including Chad and South Sudan. That amount of money brings the total U.S. humanitarian assistance for people in Sudan and neighboring countries to more than $968 million since last fiscal year.
Noyes also met with Ethiopian government officials.
Since early 2023, Ethiopia has welcomed nearly 50,000 refugees from Sudan. At a time of great instability in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia's support for displaced populations remains absolutely critical.
In both countries, Noyes said she held meetings to discuss refugee resettlement and humanitarian assistance across the continent, including the protection of humanitarian workers. Noyes said the United States will continue to work with international and local partners to provide life-saving support to the millions of people affected by the devastating conflict in Sudan.
In realms due to violence, with more arriving daily, as I saw